For those of you that haven't met me, I'm Barry Churchwoods. I'm the Venues and Companies Manager for the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society. Hello. I'm going to, before we talk to the panelists and hear from them and they introduce themselves, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and hopefully it'll be apparent why I'm telling you this story towards the end of the story. I grew up 15 miles away from here, and actually my family brought me to Edinburgh to what I thought was the Fringe when I was a kid. They would bring me to the high street and they would bring me to see the buskers and the performers on the street, and it was all very, very exciting. And it wasn't until I was 16 years old that I actually discovered the Fringe, and it was absolutely by fluke. Sandra Bernard was playing Edinburgh, and I don't know if you all know her, but for me, I didn't really know who she was. I was just a wee gay boy growing up in Livingston, and she was friends with Madonna. So me and my friends pulled our coppers together, bought a ticket, and came through to what I expected to be this wee show like I'd been used to seeing in my hometown. Obviously, we got to Edinburgh, and the show was in the Edinburgh Playhouse, which at the time was the biggest venue in Edinburgh. I think it still is, actually, in terms of operating on the Fringe. And it was Sandra Bernard, you know, it was like world-class cabaret. She was doing spoken word, singing the Stones, had really high production values, but it was also a Fringe show. So halfway through, she said, normally I'd get an interval here, and they're not giving me it. Do you mind if I freshen up? At which point, the audience said, no, that's fine. She stripped off and showered on stage, and I was addicted to the Fringe. It was quite possibly the most incredible introduction to Fringe that I could possibly have. And obviously there were lots of different things that happened there that made it the case, being in a room with 3,000 like-minded, out-of-it individuals, if you like, people who didn't really feel accepted. So there was something very nice about the community there. The reason I'm telling you this story is because this session is about Darwinian Crapshoot, and actually the result of my experience of seeing world class was that the following year I staged my own one-man show when I was 17 years old in a back room of a pub in Edinburgh called Michael Jackson Sucked My Plums. 12 people came to see it, and there are 12 people that probably shouldn't have. And I just wanted to sort of lay the ground there for you all in terms of how we look after the quality of a festival, because you can do everything you can to get them in, but it's not going to stop people like me coming. I'm going to ask our panelists here, we are going to finish on time on this panel, just so you know. I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their background, and then we'll cover some of the key questions that are in the directory of this Congress. So we'll start on my right, the lovely Annika.
Hello, I'm Anneke Jansen. I'm a program director of the Amsterdam Fringe Festival, and I have to bend downwards towards this microphone, because else he will kill me in the back.
Shall we swap?
Ah, yeah.
Is it easier if we swap?
Maybe. Okay, yeah, that's okay too. The way I got dragged into the Fringe was basically in Holland. We didn't have a Fringe festival at all. A lot of people still don't know what Fringe means, because it's also an English word. 7 years ago, Jeffrey Mulman, who is sitting right there, director of the National Theatre Festival in Holland, invited me in to talk about what he wanted to start a Fringe festival. And I was saying, oh yeah, that's really interesting. And I said, oh yeah, that's cool, I love the Fringe and everything. And then I spurted back home and looked up on the internet what the hell a Fringe was. So I found it out that way. So basically, that's how the Fringe started. We started out in the bathrooms of the Municipal Theatre, and now it's slowly growing out into a bigger festival, not as huge as Edinburgh, obviously, because nothing is as huge as Edinburgh. But I will leave it at that for a minute now, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I am Gerardo Vitali Rosati. I am here in order to speak about the Fringe Festival of Spoleto, which is a very new Fringe. We are 3 years old, and in Spoleto there is a very ancient festival called the Festival of the Two Wars, So I'm working with them as a press officer because I'm actually I started to work as a theater critic so that's why they proposed me to do this. So.
Thank you. And my name is Mark Fisher. I'm also a theatre critic, and the reason I am here primarily is because I am the author of the Edinburgh Fringe Survival Guide, which is a book that came out earlier this year, and it is a guide aimed at would-be Fringe and existing Fringe performers to everything to do with putting on a show, from publicity to surviving week 2 as we are at the moment, and all of the other details and paraphernalia. I'm quite interested in Barry's introduction because Barry is one of the people that I interviewed for the book, and he gave me neither of those stories, and both would have been fantastic.
They're in my own book.
I've lived... Well, I'm not going to buy it. I have lived in Edinburgh since 1987. I worked in the Fringe office myself in 1986 and 1987. And 1987, I decided that Edinburgh was such a beautiful city that I wanted to live here year round, and haven't left and haven't missed a Fringe since either. So I work as a freelance journalist, so that's who I am.
Okay, thank you very much. So obviously we have a very well-rounded panel, and we're very open to opening it up to the floor at any point. So if you do want to butt in, please do, and we'll try and run a mic to you so everyone can hear you. I'm going to start just by asking the questions that we're all wanting to know. So first of all, Annika, how do you communicate with your audience what a fringe is?
Yeah. Well, there are several ways. First of all, by realizing, as I was at the beginning, that a lot of people don't know what a fringe is in the Netherlands. Basically, if you go to England or to Australia or to America, everybody you talk to and say, oh, I'm working for a fringe festival, goes like, yeah. And in the Netherlands or in Germany or in France, it's more like, fringe, what? What is it? So we have to really explain what a fringe is, what the meaning is, what the feeling is. So we are really focused on the feeling of a fringe, of the open access idea, which is, which is completely new in the Netherlands. There was a lot of resistance, especially from the cultural institutes and from reviewers also, and from fundings in the beginning, about the whole idea of open access. The whole first question was, of course, how do you control quality? And they were not at all used to the idea. There was no jury involved. There was no programmer really involved. So the whole idea of talking about a fringe and talking to a lot of people about the feeling, about independent artists, about artists making the festival together with the audience and taking the director or the programmer out of the equation is mainly has been the focus of the Fringe Festival. Another thing we also very consciously do is we hardly communicate the word theater. We really focus on the feeling of the festival, like it's open and everybody can join and participate, and it's also about the audience, so we really focus on that to bring that across.
Okay, thank you very much. And Gerardo, for you, you're the press officer.
Yeah.
So a lot of your job is obviously about the communication side of this. How do you do that in Italy?
So one thing we did this year was a congress, an open congress, and we had Anneke and Kath, Myland, and Christabel from Anderson from here, from Edinburgh, in order to discuss about the idea of fringe. So it was a very important moment for us in order to let the people discover this thing, and as for me, it was a good moment for the press, as we had these international guests to have articles on the paper and broadcasting news about this very concept. So we had the television speaking about the fringe in the world. So for us, it was a very important moment in order to let the people discover what we were planning.
Yeah.
After that, during the festival, just trying to have press conference in order to explain what our. But I think this Congress was a very good occasion to explain our feeling.
great. And so from discussions we've been having this morning as well, it's very apparent that the word fringe has lots of different connotations to lots of different people. It means it's an attitude, it's a movement, it's, you know, it comes straight back from the first time that the phrase was coined, something happening on the fringes of this festival. And obviously, we all have different models, and the purpose of this session is to look about how you can guarantee quality. And Mark, in terms of people selling work to you, and in terms of maybe a festival as a whole, how do you pitch that idea when you that something is good when you can't guarantee the quality of it?
Do you mean as if I'm trying to write an article about it, or if
well, just if people are trying to, you know, gauge interest and trying to get people riled up about it?
Mm-hmm. Well, purely from a journalistic point of view, which is obviously not the way that everybody looks at art. Often, what I'm looking for is the sense of an interesting story. So certainly, if it was May, June, and I was looking to sell an article, because I work as a freelance writer, so if I was looking to sell an article to an editor, I'm not really concerned about whether the show is good or not. What I'm concerned with in June is whether the show is interesting or not. And so if a show is if a performer is famous, is an obvious example, then it doesn't matter to me whether their show is good or bad. What makes a story is the fact that they're famous, or if they're related to somebody famous, or if they've had an interesting story that is somehow related to the show, or if the show itself is based on an interesting story. So all of those things are irrespective of quality.
Yeah, so in terms of the people in this room, in terms of heads of festivals and leaders, how do they pitch their festival as a whole to you, to get you engaged?
Well, there I suppose I am looking for quality because if you're going to make a long journey to a different country, then you want to know that it's going to be worthwhile you doing it. And although I have to say that there is an advantage of a fringe or any sort of festival, in that if you know that you can go to Grahamstown and see 10 shows while you're there, then statistically the chances are that you're going to see something that's going to be interesting. And even if you didn't, you're going to get something about the measure of the culture and the things that people are interested in, both from the audience point of view and also from the artistic point of view. And so I think one of the great privileges of my life, as my professional life, is that I've been able to go almost like a social anthropologist, an artistic anthropologist, going to different places within Scotland, within Britain, and within the world, and finding out how cultures express themselves. And that strikes me as a great, as I say, a great privilege, and something that a festival can do, so that the success of a festival never rests on one show. I mean, if you do have one hit show, then that's fantastic. If you have a Black Watch, as the Edinburgh Fringe had Black Watch in 2006 from the National Theatre of Scotland, then of course that makes the Fringe look fantastic. But of course, if there are in Edinburgh, because it's so big, there can be another 80, 100 shows that are also good, don't have to be fantastic, but good enough to make the whole event curious and interesting, and a bit more like flicking through the television channels, where you can discover an animal program, you can discover a news program, you can discover a comedy, and all of them are interesting in their own way. And I think a Fringe festival has that quality to it.
And for you, Gerardo, in your third year, have you had 3 festivals? Or
no. Actually, it is my first year as a press officer. It was this year I did my first experience as a.
And is it the 3rd year of the festival?
Yes.
Have 3 happened already, or is the 3rd one? No, the 3rd one. Kath and Christabel were at the 3rd one. Yes.
Yeah.
Of course. Okay. So how do you sell the festival as a whole when it's so young and you can't guarantee the quality or the uptake of the artists?
Yeah. Actually, I agree with what Mark said. Actually. From a journalistic point of view, quality is not really my first problem, because actually I would just give an example. This year we had this show about created by a girl who went to do interviews to the prostitutes in the streets of Milan, out of Milan. So every night she used to go out in Milan all the night in order to interview these women. And so this was the was her show. Actually, in her show, what she did was to write. She wrote what these women said, and she had 4 actresses perform these women. Actually, this to me was a very strong stories, and I could sell this story very, very well in Italy. So we had radio interviews. We had the major newspaper in Italy dedicated an entire page about this show. So it was a very, very good coverage. After that, I finally saw the show, and it was not so good. But I mean, that's just for say that actually I communicated the show before that the show arrived. I mean, the most important thing. Actually, I have also to say that in Italy the reviews are disappearing. So we just on the major newspapers. So we had reviews on the web. We still have reviews on the papers, but really small and quite nothing. So I mean, what we can have in order on this paper is an article published before the show, so interviews, presentation, like that. So to me, I mean, from a for the press officer point of view, this show was a good show. I mean, even if it was not good in terms of quality.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, and that it certainly happens in Edinburgh a lot. Welcome. It certainly happens in Edinburgh a lot. That the word quality just again means something different to different people. It can be the quality of experience, it can be the quality of the work. A show that I won't mention that's playing in Edinburgh just now, every single person I know that's been to see it, and they're maybe like 30 or 40 because it's got a big name in it, are saying it's terrible, but they're saying they loved it. Yeah. Because there's this whole thing that's happening. And Fringe, again, there is that sort of freak show element of everything that's going on. Do you want to talk? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something very interesting about the word. The word I often use is context. And as a journalist, my job is to ascertain what the context of a particular production is. So, is this a middle class piece of theatre playing to a bourgeois audience, or is it a working class show taking place in a community theatre? This is what I'm thinking about all year round. And as a journalist, as a theatre reviewer, you're calibrating your response according to what the show is trying to do and who it's trying to reach and so on. And that changes on a day-by-day basis as well as a city-by-city basis. And I think in terms of the Fringe, the context is fascinating because the audience is not just critics that do that, it's the audience that does that. And if an audience goes to see, for example, in Edinburgh, the free Fringe is becoming more and more significant. So if they go to see a free Fringe show in the back room of a pub or even in the bar of a pub where you've still got people drinking in some cases, I think that the audience itself makes that adjustment and realizes that I'm not spending £30 to see Sandra Bernhard in the Edinburgh Playhouse. I'm maybe not spending any money at all. I've just bought a drink. I'm sitting here. This guy's going to try to entertain me, and their expectations are therefore. It's not so much that the expectations are lower, but they just are aware that the particular situation is different to the situation of a normal night out, and I think consequently. They might enjoy a bad show in the way that you're describing because what else would they have been doing? They might have just been hanging around on the street corner, so it's better than nothing, which isn't a reason for having low quality, but it does mean that audiences can be a bit more sophisticated than we sometimes think that they are in the way that they process the work that they see.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go back to the origin of Fringe in terms of, certainly Edinburgh starting up in the same way that Adelaide started up, the off of another festival, a curated festival. Is it a different quality of work if it's in the Fringe?
Yeah, I think it is. I agree with what was said before, that a Fringe festival, at least for the Amsterdam Fringe Festival, it is sort of experimental. It's like people dare to take risks, the artist, but also the audience. So if everybody takes risks, that's the context where you're getting yourself into. And it also means that a lot of the artists, at least I find that more and more in Amsterdam each and every year, make different work than what they would do when they would be in a theater festival that was curated. Because then they have sort of an expectation, like it has to be this kind of work. At least in Holland, what I saw the last few years was that in the production house and in smaller theaters, which were all programmed. There was the same brand of work. There was a certain way of making theater that was accepted. And if you didn't do that, you didn't get into that scene. But there was a whole other scene underneath that wanted to do different work. And that's what you see emerging in the Fringe. And I do agree that the whole experience of taking risks is part of the fun of the Fringe. I mean, if you go to the Fringe, you either remember very good shows or very bad shows, and nothing in the middle. And it's great experience also to talk about the really crappy shows. Sometimes, actually, the crappy shows get a lot of audience because people talk so much about them, and everybody wants to see the most crappy show. Like you want to see the best show, you know. It's sort of a sport.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I mean, up until a few years ago, the Scotsman publication used to make sport of the one-star reviews. Used to all be on one page at the back, and you know, people used to just go there and find it. But I suppose that takes us back to you know, the Darwinian Crapshoot, doesn't it? In terms of is a Fringe natural selection for artists?
I think I'm sort of skeptic about Darwin. Also about Freud, for the matter. But well, I think it's partly true because there's a competition model going on there, and you know, the strong one survive basically. But what I found really interesting about the Fringe is it's also kind of a wiki model. It's also something that people create together, and together, you know, artists correct also each other's work. They talk to each other. I see every year the quality rising, not because of per se the competition alone, but also because the communication and the feeling that they are building a festival together. So I am sort of in the middle between Darwin and Wiki.
Excuse me. So, yeah, I mean, artists come here to find success. They come to your Fringe to find some sort of success, whether it's creative or commercial. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, is there? And I wonder, Mark, if you could talk a little bit about the role of the media and journalists and the critics in promoting the Fringe.
In one sense, the media is certainly within the context that I'm used to, which is this city, can amplify the word of mouth and sometimes even establish the word of mouth that is existing in the city already. However, the word of mouth, I think, is probably still the strongest, this is my hunch, is the strongest influence in terms of getting the reputation of a show during the Fringe itself. So if you want to sell a show, get people talking about it, get people twittering about it, and if you have a 5-star review from the Guardian newspaper, from Lynn Gardner, a very respected critic, that will also add to that level of word of mouth. Something very interesting, I think, has been happening over the past few years, which is the rise of the internet and the increase in two things. Well, one is the vast number of blogs that exist now carrying reviews that people are doing of the Fringe, and also a number of free sheets that exist reviewing the Fringe as well. I think it's now very difficult for a regular audience member to get any sense of what the standard critical opinion is in Edinburgh anymore. That it used to be the case, maybe up till about 10 years ago, where a review in the Scotsman or a Fringe first from the Scotsman was a sure sign that you would have queues around the block and that you could pretty much be rest assured that your show would be a sellout run for the rest of the time in Edinburgh. I don't think that exists anymore. You can capitalise on a good review by reproducing it and telling people about it, but people's memories aren't very long. So even if you have a bad review on a Monday, by Wednesday people will have forgotten that you had a bad review, so you can still come back from that. And equally, if you've got a great review, it might, I'm not saying it has no influence, but it's much harder to work out what influence that will have. Though in terms of success, if your idea of success is to then have a tour of the south of England in the autumn, then your good press and your good word of mouth and that general industry buzz that might exist around your show, that will all be very, very advantageous when you then start talking to producers and promoters and maybe other people like you, other festivals and so on, because that's where the probably really crucial decisions are being made. So I think the media can reinforce all of this, but I don't think it's if it was ever instrumental in it, I don't think it's instrumental now.
Okay. Annika, you were telling me earlier that I don't know if you guys know how this works. Maybe you can explain a little bit. But certainly Amsterdam Fringe don't spend any money on advertising. That's right.
That's true.
So could you talk through that and then maybe talk about how important it is for artists on your Fringe to appear in the press, to sell their shows?
Yes. What we do is basically this is a photo of a famous young photographer, up-and-coming artist who made the flyer and the poster of this year. We did that last year as well. We use an artist on the cover. This is the winner of last year, Kelder Bye Bye World, at the Underbelly. Please go. And what we do, because we don't want to spend money on advertising, we do a lot of guerrilla marketing. What happens with this is because it's an art photographer making a beautiful picture, like papers like Elle magazine or Glamour or whatever want to publish this without asking any money because it's art. And then you don't have to pay. So that's basically how we do it. And the next question was how important?
Because of that, you not having like any marketing, collateral other than that. Is it more important that critics come and assess work for audiences to find it?
Well, we do have a lot more than just the flyer and a poster. I mean, that's not all. It is important that critics come, of course, to review the work, and we get more and more in. But the same goes in Holland as it is in Italy. The room for reviews is getting smaller and smaller, and it's not like here in Edinburgh, for example, or in England for that matter, and a lot of festivals. There's like a thing where the Scotsman and different newspapers write each and every day about the Fringe Festival and about a lot of shows. In Holland, what is way more normal, if you have a festival, you get per newspaper one article for the whole of the festival. And they crunch together like 3 or 4 shows, and then that's the review. So that's a bit different. So we start working more and more like with Fringe Review, with bloggers, with online, because we have to start, creating our own reviewers. And I think that's a movement that you see generally, that there's more and more bloggers and more online going on, and more instead of waiting for the national papers to write an article of 300 words.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, going back to what you were saying earlier about the multitude of bloggers and micro-bloggers and websites and the fact that you can leave Edinburgh with 15 5-star reviews this year if you want. Well, if you've got good work. They won't all be from publications that you've heard of, but that is possible. Do you think that means it's more important? Do you think audiences trust reviews, or do you think it's more important to be looking at awards for your work, looking at putting yourself forward for any of the awards that you might?
Yeah, I think probably what it is that you need the whole package, don't you? And so that if you've got good reviews and awards and good relationships that you've been, all the networking stuff that you might have been doing in Edinburgh, and Edinburgh, of course, not least because it has all you people in it at the moment. It is great for networking. It is a great networking centre. And all of that, I think, needs to, if you're going to succeed as an individual company, then all of that stuff, all of that work has to be done, in addition to getting audiences and all the rest of it. I think audiences are probably audiences, there's 2 things that happens to audiences. One is that they get overwhelmed by the range of opinions. And I've met people already this year who've had 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, and 5-star reactions to their shows. And so if you're an audience member, how are you possibly going to make sense of that, apart from to know that it's a show that's likely to split people? So you have to be quite a sophisticated audience to realize that some reviews are more reliable than others, and that means that you have to do quite a lot of reading, and you might be familiar with a reviewer whose writing you always agree with or always disagree with. But at least it gives you some sort of response way of working out what your response should be. But yes, an award. getting an award is lovely long term. It'll make a little bit of a difference in terms of your marketing while you're in Edinburgh, but I think long term an award is very important because you can then say, and you see people doing it all the time, you know, they put it on their poster, Fringe first winner, Herald Angel winner, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and again, from a young Fringe, are you spending time cultivating those relationships to try and set up awards, or are you still so far into your infancy that you just want it to work without going bankrupt?
No, actually, I wanted to I was thinking about what you were just saying just before about the differences with the paper and the blog, and so I want to keep this. Actually, what I think is that I mean, I was thinking about it, was just saying. So it's true that for I think there is a different for the different kind of reviews have different kind of audiences, actually. So in my opinion, for the artist, in order to sell a show, I was thinking about what happened in Spoleto. So we had just a few reviews on the major newspaper and a lot of reviews on the internet and so on. So I think that for the audience, for the normal audience, it's important to have a review published online is very useful because I mean, if you just look for, you don't know if you want to know to see a show or not, you just go on the internet and maybe you find more easier a review published on the website, and you won't find on the internet a review published on the major newspaper in Italy because it's just published on paper, and if you want to see it on the web you have to pay. So so it's different. I mean, but for a producer that doesn't know if to buy or not a show, it's the name of the very big critic from writing which count. Yeah. So I was reflecting about this. As what we do in Spoleto, we invite everyone, of course, as it is a very new. I mean, during the main festival, the Festival of the Two Worlds, there are many quite. All the critics working in Italy are coming Spoleto, so it's quite easier to get some of them come to see our shows. But actually our festival lasts much more than this, so during the other period it's much more difficult to get these important critics to come, so it is easier to have bloggers and people writing on the internet. That's it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to come out actually into the audience, because I've got a handheld. Because I can see some questions. We've got 15 minutes, and we do really want to finish this on time, so as we can. Well, actually, we have staff working downstairs on this, and we want them to get breaks.
Hello. I am the coordinator of Fringe in Brazil, and my question is: in Brazil, Fringe doesn't make sense because it's a word in English, so it's really difficult to explain what is the Fringe. And I think the challenge that we have there is to make people know that they are gonna taking risks, and this is for us something that is really difficult because I received some emails that the audience saying, "Oh, that show was really bad. I don't know how can you put this in your program, and you're insane. I pay for something that is shit." and a lot of emails that we receive, and we know that the audience didn't get it. They don't understand what it is, the Fringe. And I want to ask for all here, how did you think that we can make audience understand that they are this challenge of it's fun to take risks, it's good to take risks?
I'm going to take this away from the panel actually, because we have a.
Well, I find it interesting to answer this because we had the same problem, of course, and what we did, we used ambassadors. So we invited famous Dutch actors and singers and TV stars, etc., to be a guide for a night. So we encouraged the audience to visit 3 or 4 shows a night and explain that it could really work out terrible. But so we actually had famous Dutch actors taking people on a tour, and sometimes 50 people walked through the city of Amsterdam and visiting more and more shows. And that's how we introduced the Fringe feeling and explained people that it's a sport actually to see many shows, and some of them you might dislike. Yeah.
My name is Em, and I'm with the St. Louis Fringe, and we just had our first year, and we actually had a really unusual problem with the Uncreated Model, which was that we actually found that we had really, really, really good productions. We had 30 productions, and I didn't feel that we had a weak link in our bunch, and we had no negative reviews from any of the patrons or critics, and we had a critic at every show. But we had a really, 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 really difficult time selling the concept of the unjuried fringe in our community, which tends to not be very trusting of risk-taking work. So I wondered if anybody else has had that problem, not necessarily of pitching, like telling people you might see a bad show, but letting people know that just because something's unjuried or uncensored doesn't mean that it's going to be some weird, bizarro crapshoot. That's the end of my question.
I was answering another question, and I have a couple of things to say. In answer to that one, I think to both of the questions, you can't really. I think there's a lot of people in the UK, in the English-speaking world anyway, that don't actually understand what a fringe is either. So it's not just a language thing. But I'd say that if you're in Brazil and you don't have an English, have a Portuguese word for fringe, then you could possibly find one. But I think that it's a concept which is growing, and that even people who come to Edinburgh don't necessarily get it either. So it's something that is growing and evolving over time, and it won't happen straight away. In terms of actually this is, how to promote your fringe and ensure its reputation when you don't control quality, I've got several points that I'd like to add to what the panel have been saying. Is that as a fringe that isn't Edinburgh, you haven't grown over that period of time, so you might be doing this for the very first time, or you might have been doing this just for a few years. You need to make it relevant to the participants. You need to earn your registration fee. And in that way, you need to be pitching the fringe as an arts marketplace that it is. That it will be that the more you encourage people to understand that it's an arts marketplace, the more that you will encourage quality. The more journalists will come, the more international cultural agencies will come. And also, if you're organising a fringe festival again for the first time, or you're starting out, I'd start also by setting frameworks in place.
So actually, artists that are in the Netherlands that we do train in workshops how to fringe, about how to set up the business, how to do PR and everything. But they also hear the perspective from somebody that's been doing it for a long time and is not somebody that they know or is in their own community. That always works really well, because when somebody from Edinburgh, for example, comes over and explains to them, well, this is how it works in Edinburgh, everybody's like, okay, wow. And that is really interesting, sharing that knowledge and really tapping into that on a very practical level. Like, make the questions really practical. Don't go like philosophizing on whatever, but just let it be very hands-on. How do I get a venue? How do I, sort out the money? How do I, like, all these bullet point questions, really.
Okay. Thank you. Gerardo?
Something that we are doing is that actually our festival is called La Mama Spoleto Open. Actually, it's created by La Mama Theatre New York, which has a theatre a base in Spoleto. So what we are trying to do is to invite artists, friends with La Mama New York, to come and present their shows in Italy, in Spoleto. So that's, for instance, we will have Elizabeth Swedos coming in September. So that's an important thing to us, because it is is easier to get critics, professionals, people coming to see these big shows, and so that they can stay in Spoleto and see also the other shows. And it is very important for the other artists for two reasons: because they can have much more professional public to see their shows, and they can relate to these big important artists and to know them. And sometimes it's very interesting for them. We have had many often Americans artists because of La Mama, which is set in New York. But so it has been a very important thing to us. So I think this is something we are trying to do.
Thank you. And let's have some final words from Mark. I'll do the why not buy his book part, so then he can give you something inspiring.
Oh, go on, let me do that. Yeah, so I've got 2 tips and 1 observation. Tip number 1, buy the Edinburgh Fringe Survival Guide. I have a few copies here if anybody wants to buy it. I can sell it to you for £10. Tip number 2 is to come and see my show, which is the Edinburgh... This is the Fringe, is what you have to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the Edinburgh Fringe Survival Guide live. I had a session today and yesterday. My next 2 are next, if you're still around, next Thursday and Friday, when we'll be looking at initially success and failure on the Fringe on Thursday, and then it's a similar sort of discussion to this, and then looking at survival beyond the Fringe on Friday, and that's at the Pleasance at 11:30. I have flyers to tell you that. My observation... The things that you were saying just then, the various people were saying about trying to appeal to audiences and get over that idea that quality is unpredictable. This is a problem that theatres in particular have all year round, and I think festivals have a particular advantage in this respect, because if you're a theatre and a customer comes to see your show or one of your shows, it may be the only thing that they go to see all year. If they don't like it, it may be the last thing they ever go to see, because they will believe that this investment that they made into this one show disappointed them, and therefore the whole of the art form is rubbish, and in future they'll just stick to cinema or whatever else that they like to do. The huge advantage of a festival is that you can have a range of experiences, and if you can get over the idea, as I think the gentleman there was saying, that you can go and see 5 or 6 shows in a night, or 3, however many, then you start getting to the idea as an audience member that you can have that range of experiences. And what's important about the example of Edinburgh is that there is no connection between the word fringe and the word riskiness. There are risky shows on the Fringe, but there are many, many very mainstream shows which appeal to a very, very unadventurous audience, as well as some of the shows that you can see at Summer Hall, which are provocative and artistically challenging and all the rest of it. So a festival can offer that whole package to encourage audiences to experience the festival as a whole, and therefore they don't blame the art form individually. They can have a range of experiences. So I think take heart in that, because I think that is something that can be sold.
Okay, thank you very much. So your next breakout sessions, you go immediately into them, and they last 45 minutes, and then we'll be heading down to the Edinburgh City Chambers for some pomp and circumstance. That's what we call it here. It's very nice. The food there's great if they're putting food on for you. And the wine's very nice as well, so you should definitely make sure you get down there. Please help me thank our panelists. They've been great. Thank you very much.